So yesterday we had started working on the login, registration, and profile of the student application. Yes.
Question on session.
Yeah.
Like when we are when a user is logged in, so at each request the session should be validated, or like
Yes. Yes. We'll see that today. But typically, when you're accessing pages that are not publicly available, you don't need to check the session. But if you're going and accessing something that is private, that it's protected, it should always be prefaced by a checking on the server. Hey, server, is this person logged in? And the server would respond saying yes. And if so, then you let them through.
so we could make a global function so that like the validation can be done, and then later on it should be delegated to the other request that has been sent from the.
Yes, you could do that. Yeah. Or it could be a part of a service, which is a singleton, and then it can be injected into anybody who needs it. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. All right, and so yesterday we ran into an issue that the session was changing every time we went from either the registration page to the profile page, and it's the same issue that we had early on when we were looking at the either was it jQuery that we're using? Yeah. That on the fetch, the default is to always not include the cookies, right? And the server interprets this as this being a brand new session, right? And it generates a brand new cookie for the client to send back. Right? So to force that the fetch to send the cookies, we need to include in our queries. We need to configure it to include the credentials, right? To include the credentials. And this is for every query that you want to make sure that participates in the same session, right? There's another one, the same origin. That only works if you are on the same domain, right? It sends cookies for the same, if they're in the same domain. But in this case, they're not, right? One is in 4200, and the other is running at 4000, and that's considered to be two complete domains, different domains. So to force to send the cookies, even if you're in different domains. Then it's include, not same origin. If they're hosted in the same domain, then yes, you can do a same origin. So having added that into all our fetches, we can now register as Greg. Register, and notice that it comes back now. It says Greg with having returned from the same session now, right? It's getting a hold of it from the session attribute current user. Now that we have that, we can continue looking at, for instance, now that I've created an account, I like to be able to log in. I like to be able to log out, and to log out. Right now what we're doing is that we're just navigating back to a login page, but actually we can just go back to the profile page and notice that it refreshes with that user. Every time we go to the profile page, it's going out to the server to fetch the information. It goes out to the server to fetch the profile information. We're not relying on the client maintaining any state, right? You should never rely on the client on maintaining any state, right? The source of truth is always the server. Always go back to the server. The server knows what to actually show. The client is dumb, right? It only receives the data that it needs to render, right? Its only responsibility is to look pretty and render things on the client, not to maintain any state. So to actually log out, what we'd like to be able to do is instead of just navigating blindly to login, is to destroy the session, right? So what we could do is that hyperlink on the profile page, the profile, instead of navigating to the logout, instead of being an actual hyperlink, we can bind it to a click event on this controller, on this component, to actually log out. Right, and so we can go there at that component and declare the. Notice that we've removed the hard-coded find user by ID. We don't need that anymore. So here we can have an event handler for logout. So this would have to go to the server. Hey, server, just destroy my session, right? I don't want you to remember anything about me anymore. And that would be in the same user session that we've been using all along. So the session, the service, we can call logout, which I don't believe we have. Let's implement that. So logout, let's implement it here. So this will be logout. And it will be a fetch, just like the others. So this will return fetch the same HTTP : / localhost 4000, and this is API / logout, say. And so we're going to return that. But this is going to be a post. So this is going to be a method. Is going to be post. So we're going to post that logout, right? And the server is just going to respond with a 200 saying, yeah, okay, I logged you out, I'm done. And just we're going to return this, and we could check out for errors, but we could blindly then, when it comes back from the server, then navigate to the just ignore perhaps the response, and then navigate to. Do we have the router? We don't have a router. Navigate with the router, right? So let's declare the router here. Oops. And with the router, we can then navigate to login. Okay. All right. So on the server side, we need to listen to that logout. Yes. Oh, I didn't. Yes, thank you. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to logout service, and let's include the credentials. Thank you. So if we try it out and navigate back to the profile, notice that the session is still there, right? Still remembers us. And if we click on logout, we get a console error saying that you tried to post. Yeah, you tried to post, but we never implemented it, right? The server is not listening for that post. So let's go back to the server and implement that. And the server is right here. We don't have it. Let's declare here an app.post. We're listening for an incoming post. So this will be API logout, and we'll call logout. Okay. And the logout function is going to have request response. And what we'll do is that we'll destroy the session. We're just going to say request.session. I think it's just destroy. And once we've destroyed it, we can just respond with a 200 saying OK, right? Or handle any error here. But let's just respond saying send back a 200. So here's you can send various HTTP codes, right? Successful code, or 404, or or 503, or any code that that the browser can interpret as successful or unauthorized, or in this case we're returning an OK, right? We did OK, we logged you out, so let's restart. And let's register. I'm running out of names. Who else? Poe. All right, so we're registered as PO. And if I log out, it takes me here. Notice that it did not complain this time. And that notice that I came back to the profile, right? It's saying that I don't know who you are, right? I went out to the session to see the current user, but it's returning as null. So I could return instead of returning the current user and checking to see, I could do that on the server. Check that the server is null, that the current user is null, and instead of returning an object, right, I could return a flag, something, you know, maybe a 0 or 503 or something that I can then use on the client and either display something on saying, sorry, no, try to log in, you can't access profile, or the profile can then kick you out to the login page. So you go to the profile page, the profile can't get the actual profile, right, and then navigates you back to the login page, the very first thing that it does. Okay? I'll leave that to you to catch this profile. Let's take a look at logging in. So logging in would be similar in that we pass in the username and password, right? To log in, we post the username and password, and we look for if this person actually exists, right? If they do exist, we set the current session, right, to include that particular user, right? And then we send them over to the profile, and the profile will be able to find that user in the current user, right? So let's take a look at that. So right now, the login doesn't do anything; just blindly navigates to the profile, right? So instead of doing that, the login could instead, let's see, where's the login? So here's the login component. In the HTML, instead of blindly navigating to login, right here, instead of going to the profile page, instead we could use the service, try to log in, right? And depending on the response, I'll do one or the other. Right? So instead of doing that, okay, we can go out to the service. So this .service. Do we have a service? We don't have a service. Right, so let's inject here the service. So this is private service, the user service client. And in here we can say, we can say this.login and pass in the username and password. And I don't believe we had implemented login. It looks like we don't. Okay, so actually this is this service.login, right? And that has not been implemented, right? So let's go in there and implement it. So it'll be login. Takes as argument username and password, and we can then return whatever the fetch of posting to that URL. Notice that we're posting. We're not doing a get, right? Even though we are actually reading, right, something. Is this? It's better to, instead of using a get and pass in the username and password in clear text as part of the URL, right? It's better to include it as an object in the body, right? So it's not, you can't see it in the URL, right? That allows you to, for instance, use HTTPS, right? That you'll be able to encrypt the body of the HTML, right? Of the HTTP request, as opposed to you cannot encrypt the actual URL itself, right? So now we're going to create an object that includes the credentials. So we can say something like var credentials that includes the username and the password. And then we can pass in those credentials as part of our post. So we're going to, the method is a post. We do want the body. It's going to be the JSON stringify of that credential, of the credentials. Okay. Let's see. We are sending it as a JSON, so this is the header. Is going to be the content type will be application JSON. we do want the credentials to be included. Meaning, if the server sends us back a cookie, right, we want to make sure that we're going to participate in that session. So yes, I want to participate in that session. What else? It's a post. We're sending the JSON. We're posting to logout. What else? That's it, right? I'm sorry? Oh, log in. Thank you. This is log in. And let's see. On the, oops. What happened here? Argument type, method, string, body, credentials, yada, yada, yada. Is not assignable to parameter request init. Fetch, input, headers. Oh, thank you. Yep. All right. So if we try to log in as PO, the server is going to complain, saying that there is no post login, right? So we need to go back to the server and declare that post, right? So let's go to the server. The server's on the other project. There's two projects here, right? There's two servers. There's two Node.js servers. One of them is hosting my local Angular project, so I can do development locally on my machine. Typically, you could have one of them be embedded inside of the other, or deploy the Angular inside of the other. You could build it and deploy it as a distribution, but it's better to keep them apart, right? Okay, so let's implement the login. So it will be a post. It will be login, and it will be supported here by login. And what we're going to do is that we're going to take that username and password, right? And we're going to try and find if there's a user with those credentials. Okay, and so it'll be somewhere here. It'll be something like function login, and it'll be the request and response. So we're going to grab the credentials from the body. So credentials from the body, and then we can extract the username from the credentials, or we can pass it. We can pass a whole object to find user by credentials or something like that, right? So hopefully in the model we would have something like user model, find user by credentials, right? And we would pass in the credentials, and then this would come back with hopefully a user, an actual user, or not, right? And then we would send it back to the user, right? We would check to see if it's null. Maybe we could send like a flag or a 0 or null, something that the client could use as an understanding that this person doesn't exist, right? Or if the user is found, if it's not null, then we can send the whole user back, right? With perhaps removing the password away from the object, right? So that the password never travels back to the client. And so we're just going to keep it simple. So we're just going to respond and send back the user. But we don't have find user by credentials, so we have to implement that, right? So let's implement that. And that would be in the model. So let's in the model we would have a find user by ID. We would also have something function find user by credentials. And you would have here the credentials. And here you would have a finder method that would use the low-level user model, Mongoose user model, and would do a find. This would be a generic find, right? That would filter by whatever the credential is, right? And so you could say username is credentials username. Actually, the credentials is already in the format of the filter, right? So we could just pass in, right, because username, right? This is already the structure of the credentials object that is coming from the client, isn't it? Right? So we could just use credentials here. Yes? Right? It's already a JSON object in that format. Right? Username, password. So it's going to filter by that. Hopefully it'll find this person and return an object. And what we'll do is that not only we're going to return it to the server, right, we check is it null and whatnot. We're going to be optimistic, and hopefully it will come back. And we're going to put them in the session, right? We're going to put them right on the session. So it'll be request.session, and then what is it? Current user is a user object. Okay. Yeah, we would delete it. We would say something like delete use.password, something like that, right? Or in the find user by credential. Oh, why is it not?
Fine. It's fine. You spelled it right.
Find. Did I spell it wrong? Find. Still not finding it. Oh, we never exported it. We need to export it, right? We need to make it available. What you could do also on the Finder, there is a second argument. There's a second argument that allows you to filter, right? And you can say the fields that you want. By default, you get all the fields, right? But you can filter out and say, well, I don't want this particular field. You can say password. I think it's -1. And you can turn off particular fields that you don't want, or fields that you want. Right, it's like the select statement. Then you can say select and then the fields that you want. So this is the equivalent. All right, so let's see. Let's restart the server. And let's try this again. So let's refresh here, and we say po. So it didn't complain. Let me see. Did it actually go out? Okay, so it did go out. The first one. Notice that the first one is what is called a pre-flight query. Okay, that's since it's cross-domain, right? One of the domains is asking the other domain, is it okay? Are you accepting posts or communications from this domain? And the server responds, yes. And said, yes, I accept post. Okay? And then the second query is the actual query. Well, wait a minute. I'm only getting the password. Wait, I think I got got it wrong. So I think maybe it's just you say the ones you want. I think it is. We restart that. Okay, so you choose the ones you want. You list them. Notice that ID comes back anyway, right? You would have to explicitly turn off ID if you don't want it. Anyway, so we have the login, but I think we kind of forgot to actually navigate there, right? We got a hold of the person, but what we should do is that actually when this comes back successfully, we're just going to navigate, right? Obviously, you could do some validation here, right? If I get a 0 or a null or something back from the server that I didn't like, I would not actually navigate, right? I would maybe display some content. So if it's successful, we are going to navigate to the profile. Right, so let's try it out. So if you say po and say login, and it went out, and the profile came back with username po, but it didn't render. Why didn't it render? So the profile came back correctly. Why are you not rendering this? Let's take a look at source. We can look at the register, user client, widget lists, and this is the login. App profile. So the profile component. User router login. Da, da, da. Here's a profile component, and on ng init, we get a hold of the profile, this.user user. That looks right. Let's look at the profile component, and there it is. There's where we fetch it. Let's put a breakpoint right there. And there's our user. We have our ID. We have our username. Why are you not configuring it? Oh, I think because password might be required. I think maybe because we're using this user object. Let's the user object. We have username. We have password. It's not being used anywhere. Is that what it is? Let's see. Let's verify if that's the case. User, update user, login, user, da da da. Continue. User. This.user. This.user. Why are you not rendering it? Update. Did I not refresh? Update user. Update user. It's not updating, is it? My update user is not updating. Let me stop the server. Okay. This.user. And the breakpoint is right here, and I get back user. User has ID and username, and the ID, and this.user is user. And it's not rendering. Interesting. Why are you not rendering? Let's go to the component. The component says that it's a username. Oh, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple here. And this.username is equal to user.username. And then let's add here username and password, all the fields that are on the form. Username, oh, undefined. Am I misspelling it? Username, is that correct? Oh, it's an array. Okay, that's what it was. It's an array. Yeah. Okay. So we either get the first one here on the client, right? Or a better option would be to go back to the server, and instead of find will always return an array. Okay. So what we could do is just do find one, and what this will do is just it'll unwrap the array and return the first one. Okay.
For this thing, if anything you don't want to show, you could put 0.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Is 0? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you. So if we do that and we restart the server, oops, yeah. Let's try it again. Let's take a breakpoint. And let's actually try to log in again. So po, log in. There it is. Okay, so we have a username and password. All right, so we have people. We need to be able to enroll them in a course, right? But before we can enroll them, there need to be sections, right? That if there are any, and once there are sections, folks can maybe navigate from a course, go to those sections, and say, "Ooh, this section still has these many seats." So let's talk about creating sections for courses. Right? And now remember that in the home page we have the list of courses here. And what we could do is not just navigate to a particular course, but we can add additional buttons here that will allow you to maybe have folks and register for that particular course. So let's work on that next.